What's up, everybody? Trevor here again. It is July 31st, 2016, and I'm coming to you from the beautiful Pacific Northwest. I am finally back home after 3 months of exploring Europe, and I could not be more excited to get to hang out with my dog once again. It's a little bit surreal being back, but like I promised in my last video, I gotta get Norway out of the way since I couldn't find the free time in LA to knock it out. So we're talking about Norway this video, and a little bit of reading, and probably one of the most influential books that I've read in recent memory. So, to get Norway out of the way, we're in Norway from July 5th to July 14th. If you watched my last video about Denmark, you know I was traveling with my sister Devon. So from Copenhagen, we caught an overnight ferry up to Oslo. And this ferry is more like a cruise ship. So we had our own cabin with bunk beds. There was about 5 different restaurants, there was a casino, there was hot tubs at the back of the boat, there was like a kiddie swim area on one of the floors at the front of the boat. But overall, pretty good experience. Definitely made more sense monetarily to take the overnight ferry versus taking all-day bus ride up to Oslo and then having to pay for a place to stay that night. So made sense and didn't get seasick, so no complaints there. So we made it to Oslo. Our first day there, we threw our stuff in a bag at the central train station and we went on foot to go explore. Checked out this award-winning coffee shop, had some great espresso, and they roast the coffee right there in the main room, so it smelled amazing. And from there we walked around, checked out some of the parks where the palace is. We got to the palace just in time for the changing of the guards, so that was kind of cool. And from there we made our way back down to downtown and the Opera House. And the Opera House is absolutely spectacular, all white marble, and it looks like it's kind of like crashing into the sea like a boat. So I'll get some pictures uploaded of that and of the hikes we did. So from Oslo, we took an overnight train up to Stavanger, and Stavanger is on the west coast of Oslo, and that was our base camp for 2 days to go do hikes. And so we took our stuff off the train, hustled over to a ferry, put our stuff in the ferry walkers, and took a ferry out to another part of Oslo. I'm not sure exactly which little city we ended up in, but from there we took a bus up to the trailhead, and then we hiked. And the first hike we did was called Pulpit Rock, and I'd give it like a 6 out of 10 difficulty. The first mile was these really big stairs, basically stone steps, so it was a pretty tough hike. Definitely sweating by the time we got up there. But once you get to the top, amazing views. This very sharp precipice of a rock that drops 1,000 feet, 2,000 feet down to the beautiful blue fjords. And yeah, definitely worth the hike. Started raining once we had gotten to the top and ate lunch, so kind of rushed, got our way back down to the bus and crossed the ferry and found our way back to Stavanger. So while we were in Stavanger, we grabbed an Airbnb for the night, and in the morning, we checked out of the Airbnb and tried to catch another bus that was going to take us to a different trailhead. Unfortunately, we got to the bus and it was already sold out, the tickets. So we ended up having to wait around a little bit, got some coffee, some breakfast, and then rented a car. And on a side note, we rented a Honda Civic Tourer, which is like a 1.6 liter 6-speed diesel. And it gets 70 plus miles to the gallon. So they don't sell it in the US, probably because it gets such amazing gas mileage, but super cool car, pretty fun to drive. I had a lot of fun on the mountain switchbacks that day. But back to the hike. So it took about a 3-hour drive out of Stavanger to the trailhead, and this hike was called Kjørgabolten, and this one was even more difficult than the first one. It was like about 10 kilometers and a lot of really, really steep rock faces. Luckily they have basically a chain guardrail that goes up most of the really steep parts so that you have something to hold on to and not pull yourself up, because without that it would have been really brutal. But we made it to the top eventually. One of the worst parts of the whole hike is the fact that every time you made any big gain in elevation, you'd probably drop half that elevation back down, and then you'd repeat up, down, up, down. So it happened like 4 times, but you get to the very end and there's 2 like sheer rock faces with a big boulder hanging right in the middle, and you can go stand on the boulder, take pictures, look down that 1,000, 2,000 foot drop, get some pretty cool pictures, great views of the fjord down below. So finished the hike, made our way back to Stavanger, and caught another overnight train back to Oslo. So got to Oslo, and My sister had already booked what was called the Norway in a Nutshell tour, which takes the Bergen Scenic Railway up north and then a fjord tour to Bergen, which is the second biggest city in Norway. Unfortunately, she had booked hers online and already had her ticket, but when we got there, they were sold out. And so I was not able to accompany her to Bergen. So that's where we split ways the next day after spending the night in the Airbnb. So she made her way up to Bergen, and I spent the rest of my time between two Airbnbs. One was just like a studio, and then another one with a couple, which weirdly enough, the couple graduated from WSU in 2009. And I started at WSU in 2009. So super small world that I can travel halfway around the world and still see kook stickers on the fridge and a Seattle Sounders flag in the kitchen. That was pretty cool. But I was able to meet up with my friend Caitlin, who I met in Belfast, Ireland towards the start of this trip. So I was able to hang out with her, a couple of her friends that are students in Oslo, and kind of get a little bit of the history and some of the cultural feel and the state of politics and that kind of thing. So it was great hanging out with Caitlin. We went and saw the Viking Museum, checked out some of the islands, Holdoya, and that kind of thing, and did some of the touristy stuff. But from there I caught a flight to JFK, and I kind of wrapped up my tour de Europe. So now that I got Norway out of the way, we're going to talk about reading. And so the book I'm about to describe is called The Denial of Death by Ernest Becker. And at least for me, it was one of the most profound books that I've ever read, and gave me some really incredible insights into the human mind and the nature of existence and how we find meaning in our life. And depending on your background and your academic history, it might not give you or mean as much to you as it meant to me reading it, but I'm going to do my best to put it into a few words with a few quotes so you guys can go get the feel of this book. I highly recommend you go buy it, and because it's something else. It won a Pulitzer Prize in the 70s, I believe, and definitely worthy of a read. So this book is like the intersection of philosophy, psychology, and theology, and man's search for meaning and how we make meaning out of our life and what it means to be human, and all of these obstacles and trials that every human has to face in becoming the most perfect version of themselves, for lack of a better word. But what we learn in this book is that the basic motivation for human behavior is our biological need to control our basic anxiety, to deny the terror of death. So from a very young age, we realize that we are mortal beings that are destined to die. And this is a really hard idea for us to overcome. And everybody struggles with it their entire life. Most people kind of just put it on the back burner and ignore the fact that we're going to die someday. We might die of old age, we might die of cancer, we might get hit by a car, but we're going to die somehow. It's a really terrifying idea. And so this diverges a little bit from some of the thoughts of, say, Freud, which is one of the most prominent psychologists, psychoanalysts of history of the 20th century, and where Freud thought the basic drive for human fear and anxiety and our motives in life was sexual desires, sexual urges, and the repression of these desires. But like I just said before, the real root is the anxiety of death, the fear of death. So the world is terrifying, and to say the least, Becker's account of nature has little in common with Walt Disney. Mother Nature is a brutal bitch, red in tooth and claw, who destroys what she creates. So instead of being afraid of our sexual desires or trying to ignore them, repress them, we're really afraid of death and making a meaning of our life and trying to transcend our mortal bodies. And he puts this beautifully in saying, man is literally split in two. He has an awareness of his own splendid uniqueness and that he sticks out of nature with a towering majesty. And yet, he goes back into the ground a few feet in order blindly and dumbly to rot and disappear forever. So we see this dualism of life where we want to transcend our earthly bodies, but at the same time we understand that we're trapped here on earth in these sacks of flesh that are going to decay and rot. And like I said, so we've diverged from Freud a little bit, but he puts it really nicely here in this line. To give a little backstory, you might have heard of the Oedipus complex, which is the idea that the son, to become a man, must kill his father and take the father's place and marry his mother and kind of brings together all of Freud's weird sexual desires things, but we learn that it's a little bit different format now that we're changing our root fear from sex to death. So, rather, the Oedipus complex is the Oedipal project, a project that sums up the basic problem of the child's life. Whether he will be a passive object of fate, an appendage of others, a plaything of the world, or whether he will be an active center within himself, whether he will control his own destiny with his own powers or not. So this book goes on, and we begin to explore these ideas of how we develop as humans and how we overcome these incredible fears that are always plaguing us, or how we repress them into the back of our heads so that we don't have to think about them and we can live our successful, normal, day-to-day lives. And at the same time that we learn about this fear of death, we also learn about the fear of life, and that sometimes we fear the things that we are capable of doing. So he puts it nicely as well that we fear our highest possibility as well as our lowest ones. We are generally afraid to become that which we can glimpse in our most perfect moments. We enjoy and even thrill to the godlike possibilities we see in ourselves in such peak moments. And yet, we simultaneously shiver with weakness, awe, and fear before these same very possibilities. So, it covers a lot in this book, and we really don't get a resounding answer into what it means to lead a successful life. We do learn a little bit about the idea of heroism and living a life that is heroic so that our acts may transcend time. You might think about somebody like Albert Einstein, whose name lives on past his mortal stay on Earth. So that is really kind of our goal in transcending our bodies, to make it such a name for ourselves that future generations are able to look back and see the effect and the betterment we've had on society. But like I said, I can only do this book so much justice, and my summary is far from complete. So I'm going to give you guys one more quote to kind of give you a feel, one that struck me because I consider myself an introvert, and they talk a lot, like I said, about psychology and philosophy and the need for faith in our search for meaning. So here we go. There is the type of man who has great contempt for immediacy, who tries to cultivate his interiority, base his pride on something deeper and inner, create a distance between himself and the average man. Kierkegaard calls this type of man the introvert. He is a little more concerned with what it means to be a person, with individuality and uniqueness. He enjoys solitude and withdraws periodically to reflect, perhaps to nurse ideas about his secret self, what it might be. This, after all is said and done, is the only real problem of life, the only worthwhile preoccupation of man. What is one's true talent, his secret gift, his authentic vocation? In what way is one truly unique, and how can he express this uniqueness, give it form, dedicate it to something beyond himself? How can the person take his private inner being, the great mystery that he feels at the heart of himself, his emotions, his yearnings, and use them to live more distinctively, to enrich both himself and mankind with the peculiar quality of his talent? Alright, thanks for watching, guys. Go check out The Denial of Death by Ernest Becker, one of the best books I've read in recent times. You'll get a better feel of why you do the things you do and how the fear of death shapes our lives. I think I'm going to do a one video sum up of the US, so I'll get New Orleans and LA into one video, and I've got a lot of more videos to come detailing my trip, travel expenses, means of transportation, everything, because I want you guys to do the same thing I just did. Go travel the world and see what's out there. Thanks for watching, guys. Talk to you soon.